Hello everybody, how are you all doing? Welcome back to Rule of Two Review. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about Metroid Prime 4, so let's just get into it. So I have two quick Metroid related pieces of news or theories or conversations that I wanted to have with you guys today. And the first one is kind of more of like an actual news story, whereas the second one is more of a theory about Metroid Prime 4, because as you guys could tell probably by my last video, I cannot stop thinking about Metroid and Samus and Metroid Prime 4 and oh my gosh, all these great things. So the first thing that I wanted to discuss with you guys today is this little piece of news that was circling around the internet today about the possible release window or release year for Metroid Prime 4. So what was happening was a fellow by the name of Charlie Scibetta, or Cibetta, not quite sure how to pronounce that. I think looks like it sounds probably Italian. Either way, this fellow is the Senior Director of Corporate Communications for Nintendo of America, and he was speaking with VentureBeat's GamesBeat, and in that conversation and interview, he answered a lot of questions about Nintendo and the Switch and all these different things. Actually, a pretty thorough and informative interview, so I recommend that you check it out. But there was one question he was asked, and his response to this question, he gave sort of kind of a broader response discussing a few titles and the 2018 and beyond period, and of course one of those titles he mentioned was Metroid Prime 4, and that's the real kind of key thing that quite a few sites and publications had latched onto, as far as, ooh, this is basically Nintendo saying as of right now that Metroid Prime 4 is going to come out in 2018. So really quickly before I share anything else, let me just quickly get to what he said and then the amendment that happened after that. So, the first thing he said was, quote, "We've announced a nice lineup through this year, and next year we have some big games coming with Metroid Prime 4. 2018 will be around Metroid, Kirby, Yoshi, new Pokemon game has been announced. We feel good about the lineup for this year and beyond." Okay, so that's the first quote. And if you read that quote, you'll probably notice quite a few things. That exact quote verbatim is what was shared in many publications and many online websites and stuff regarding his quote. So that is how it was initially reported directly from the GamesBeat. And if you notice, there's quite a few misspellings. There's some improper grammar. There's some incomplete sentences. It's kind of weird, right? So when I first read that, I was shocked when I saw the headline. I was like, oh my gosh, let me read these articles and let me find out what's going on here, because wow, 2018 for Metroid Prime 4. And I read that and I was like, okay, well, I mean, that's, I guess, what we can glean from that, but I don't really like the way that looked or sounded. I mean, it sounded like, what it came across as was like a mistranslation, or just like a really poor translation, like really bad English translating a foreign language. However, this is a fellow who works for Nintendo of America who was interviewed in America, so it's not actually a mistranslation. There's just something really weird going on there with how this quote read or was phrased, or how it was translated from the interview itself to the actual page on the internet from VentureBeat. I mean, whatever was happening there, something weird was going on. So what I took away from it was, yes, it maybe could sound like or be interpreted as 2018, but I don't really believe that, because personally, you guys, before today, I never thought that Metroid Prime 4 was going to be a 2018 game. I mean, to tell you the truth, I think we'd be crazy to expect that game in 2018, next year, if Nintendo had nothing more than a logo to show us at E3 just a week ago, with the phrasing, you know, title now in early development or whatever. They're going to take their sweet time on this. It's not going to be quite a Breath of the Wild kind of development cycle, but I would expect something that's at least half of that, which to me is about 2.5 years. And if all they had to show was that logo at E3, that game is at least 2.5 years away from now, in my opinion. So my whole theory has been 2019. Now what happened is, when I checked the article just a little bit before recording again, because I wanted to make sure I had the right quote to be able to show and share with you guys, I noticed that there was an update made to the DualShockers page about this quote, and here is what the update conveniently says. Updated 6/21 at 7:40 p.m. As expected, Nintendo's position in the interview was misstated. Responding to DualShockers, Nintendo PR clarified that Sabata meant 2018 and beyond, air quotes, instead of simply 2018. In other words, don't expect to see Samus return so soon. So there you go. That basically, you guys, ultimately confirms what I already felt and what I kind of hesitated to believe when I first read those quotes. This game is definitely not going to come out. Okay, I'm not going to say definitely, because, you know, saying the word definitely can be very, very dangerous when it comes to the internet nowadays. Not like I've done that, but it definitely can be for some people. It's incredibly, morbidly unlikely that this game is going to come out next year. And to tell you the truth, I'm okay with that. We basically had hints from Reggie during E3 stating, you know, this was one of those times where we felt comfortable sharing something that was so early in development, we didn't have anything to show. We knew that it was important to get the messaging out there to the Nintendo fan, to the general gamer, and to the Metroid fan that we're working on this title. You know, on top of Metroid Samus Returns for the 3DS in a couple of months. And so everything, all signs right now are pointing to this game in the earliest stages of development. And I know that that hurts to hear. I really just wanted to use this quick video and these couple of quotes about what happened today to kind of translate to you guys that I think we should probably just, you know, pull the brakes back a little bit on Metroid Prime 4, guys. I want it more than anyone you know, trust me. I am freaking out for this, but we need to be realistic. We need to give this time. As we've learned with Breath of the Wild, and honestly, with pretty much all games that Nintendo develops, the more time they have, the better off the final product is. Nintendo doesn't want to have to patch everything that they release like crazy just to make it even borderline playable. I mean, a couple of stability things, maybe they'll do that. They did that with Breath of the Wild, sure, but they're not going to release anything in a broken state. They want Metroid Prime to be as good as Breath of the Wild was. They're going to want this game to be as good as we know Super Mario Odyssey is going to be. And so this game is just going to take that time. So that's all. I just wanted to throw this out there. I think everyone saw the early headlines and reports this morning that was all over the place that said Metroid Prime 4 is 2018, but it's been updated and no one really seems to be talking about that update. I'm glad that I noticed it so that I could share it with you guys today. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about really quickly is just a fun thing when it comes to Metroid and Metroid Prime 4. And I, just like a lot of people, a lot of you fellow Metroid and Nintendo fans out there, everyone's going crazy with theories about what this game is going to be like and play like and what we can expect. So I, just like a lot of you, am theorizing and always thinking about it and always wondering and getting ideas. And I hear other people talk about things, which gets my brain going in different directions. And I just can't stop thinking about it. I talked about it last time. I can't even play the new game that I have because I just want to play Metroid freaking Prime, which is, what, 15 years old now, and I still can't stop thinking about it. So when it comes to Metroid Prime 4, one of the things that I've heard a few people talk about, and I thought about this as well, of course, over the last few Metroid releases, is multiplayer. I even saw, for example, a few days ago, the newest video put out by Nia, the video game her. Shoutouts to Nia, of course. She even discussed the multiplayer thing a little bit and theorizing about Metroid Prime 4. She randomly shouted me out on that video, so check it out. You get a little bit of a reverse shout out this time because we're all just talking about Metroid and super excited. So please check out Nia's video. I'm going to link it below so you guys can watch it. It's very good. She knows her Metroid. She talks about a lot of great things when it comes to Prime 4. But when she brought up the multiplayer thing, it got my brain thinking a little bit more seriously about the idea. A lot of what I gathered from her basis was that, you know, part of what would help Metroid or a first-person game kind of fit with the modern audience outside of just the Metroid fan is the possibility of something that on the multiplayer front. And that is true because that really does fit within the more modern sensibility of a first-person game. That is how a lot of us game with our first-person stuff nowadays, and I am a big fan of competitive first-person shooters, you guys. I love Call of Duty, I really like Titanfall. Gears of War isn't first-person, but it is a competitive shooter, and I do love that a lot, and obviously I love Halo, so I can see what's going on there. Now, the reason I started kind of thinking about it a little bit more seriously in my brain is because, and many people haven't been talking about this, but if we go back over the last decade or so, we might remember that Metroid has dabbled in multiplayer 3 separate times, which is a really big deal and probably a surprising number to a lot of people. Now, in my opinion, the most notable instance of this was in Metroid Prime 2, which came out, I want to say November 14th, 2004. Oh, I hope I'm remembering that date right. And I remember that because I was working for GameStop. It came out a week after Halo 2 did, so I was so excited that Halo 2 was coming out, and then a week later, Metroid Prime 2 was coming out. What are the odds? You know, the premier, pinnacle kind of first-person experiences for both the original Xbox and the GameCube at that time, and they were both coming out around the same time. It was so weird. Anyway, that game came out in 2004. And 2004 was a very interesting time in gaming. It was the 6th generation, GameCube, PS2, Xbox, and Halo had changed the game both in terms of first-person experiences on consoles as well as competitive and multiplayer shooting experiences that were pretty much offline until Halo 2 came around and changed the online kind of infrastructure for consoles. And when Metroid Prime 2 was coming out in that same climate and in that same gaming culture, that was something where I think that Nintendo maybe felt a little bit pressured into trying to compete against the idea of this first-person competitive shooter multiplayer thing. And here comes Metroid Prime 2, which is easily the longest, most in-depth, most involved, and by far the most difficult of any Metroid game. Not just the Metroid Prime trilogy, but of any Metroid game ever. And on top of that humongous, insanely gargantuan experience and game, was this weird little multiplayer component. And there was a bunch of different maps set in different areas from throughout the game, and you could play anywhere from 2 to 4 player split screen co-op, and they had like 2, maybe 3 modes, but I'm gonna stick with 2, I think, off the top of my head, where you literally would play as a bunch of different Samuses in different colors and run around the maps and try to shoot each other using morph ball abilities and morph bombs and your arm cannon and lock on, power up, charge beam. I mean, it was crazy. And what's interesting is it was both not good and also really good. It was not good because it wasn't deep, it wasn't online, in no way, shape, or form was that game or its gameplay going to compete with what Halo was doing at that time. Just absolutely not going to happen. But for what it was, a little random aside extra to an otherwise huge game, it worked, and it was really neat and weird to see a Metroid first-person competitive multiplayer mode. Like, you just don't see that. And then the other 2 examples are, of course, Metroid Prime Hunters on the DS, which, when did that come out? 2006 or 2007? I can't remember, unfortunately. I do have that game. It's actually pretty good, and that was online, and it was actually really well handled for what it was on the DS. It was actually pretty good. And then, of course, just last year, everyone's favorite multiplayer Metroid game, Metroid Prime Federation Force on the 3DS. So you have those 3 examples of Metroid dabbling in multiplayer stuff. 2 of those examples were legit online, both competitive and cooperative gameplay experiences, which is crazy. Now, when we look at Metroid Prime 4, and we compare that to those previous examples of Metroid, it's like, well, I guess it's not crazy for Nintendo to consider doing that. They have thought about a multiplayer universe for Metroid in the past several times. They've implemented it in a few really wacky ideas and wacky settings, and none of them were home runs. I think Hunters is the best of these online, or of these competitive Metroid experiences overall. But even that's still, it's good because it's Metroid, but it's really not great. You know, that game is really just okay. And so Nintendo's yet to really nail it or figure out how to make Metroid work in a multiplayer setting. For Metroid Prime 4, initially, like the day that it was revealed at E3, I was like, no, it's not going to be multiplayer. They're definitely just going to make it this offline thing, as it should be, just a solo adventure. But thinking about stuff and hearing other videos like Nia's, for example, and a few other people, and then the examples I just gave you of previous games, I suddenly realized it's not that impossible, you guys, especially with the Switch and how fantastically successful it is. A lot of new gamers are buying back into Nintendo again for the first time in a long time, and a lot of gamers like competitive, online, first-person shooting, multiplayer kinds of experiences. They love that. And so I just think that we should keep our minds open for the fact that Nintendo might be looking at it as a real possibility. I still don't ultimately probably think they're going to do that. If I was going to make a percentage, I would probably say 40% chance that they'll do it, but 60% chance they won't. So we're at a 40-60 split. More than likely, in my guesstimation, just nothing but a random theory and guess right now, 2 years before the game probably comes out, I feel like more than likely they won't do it, but I do think there is enough of a window for us to just be prepared, to be surprised, and maybe in a Nintendo Direct late next year, when Nintendo decides to blow the doors open on Metroid Prime 4, they might be like, and we have this multiplayer thing. And you know, like, they certainly like the idea of multiplayer when it comes to the Switch. It does have the advantage of LAN play because you can take your Switches into the same room with a bunch of your friends. And maybe there's some weird, wacky way that Nintendo feels Metroid can yet again try to thrive in a multiplayer setting. So, there you have it. A couple of Metroid topics today that I was really excited to talk about because I just love me some Metroid. I love Samus. I can't stop thinking about it. It's ridiculous. I probably have a problem, think I have a complex, and I need to see a therapist, but I will not do that until I finish the Metroid Prime trilogy for like the 10th time, and then I might look into going to see a therapist. But in all seriousness, you guys, a lot happening. I would not expect Metroid Prime 4 next year. If that's going to happen, I think Nintendo will let us know by the end of this year, 2017. But if that doesn't happen, then that game sure is not coming out next year, and it's 2019, maybe 2020, but I feel like Nintendo's going to really work hard and push to make this game release, as it should, but in 2019, not any time after that. And multiplayer for Metroid, interesting theories. Do you guys think it can work? What do you think of the previous attempts Nintendo has made to take Metroid and Samus into the multiplayer arena? Really want to hear your guys' thoughts and discussions about these two topics. That is it for me today. Thanks as always for tuning in. This is Rob of Rule 2 Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.